Hello, listeners. Welcome to KORC's News, Music, and Civics Show, and welcome to the Corvallis Civics Cafe. What happened in local civics last week, and what might happen next? Perhaps you read the recent articles in the Corvallis Advocate about the mayor calling elections to change the leadership of the city council. Or you learned about the increased fees Corvallis property owners will pay beginning in February. Need more information? I'm Wendy Byrne, your host at the Civics Cafe, where my focus is local civics. The menu includes reviews of recent city meetings and previews of meetings to come, so we know what our leaders are discussing. Side dishes at the cafe include noting the impacts of past decisions and discussing other civic-related events. Some items are a little spicy. Some weeks we have dessert at the end of the show. 2026 has already brought a little spice. Let's get started. On Monday, January 5th, the City Council had their first meeting of the new year. It had some piquant moments. In fact, the meeting opened with an item of low spice level when Councillor Bowden moved to modify the agenda. The motion failed, but later in the meeting, the item came back, and as sometimes happens with spicy dishes, the second time around it was hotter. Other highlights from the meeting include the discussion of the results of the biannual community survey, the vote for new City Council President and Vice President, and the discussion and vote regarding suspending sweeps of the camps of our unhoused community members during the upcoming point-in-time count. The community survey refers to the formal biannual survey that the city contracts out to Polco, who perform municipal polls all over the United States. Polco distributes, collects, weights, and analyzes the data. I will be curious to see if the use of its results is productive for both city staff and the city council, and if those uses can be conveyed in a way that makes sense to the public. For example, there were custom questions in place this year to help collect information about our downtown, as efforts are underway to consider the creation of an urban renewal district in downtown. Will this community survey results align with feedback currently being collected from community members via the work of the Downtown Vitality Strategy Task Force? If the information reinforces itself, that's one thing. What if it conflicts? Which feedback wins? If you are curious to learn more about the community survey, you can find links to it in the Spotlight section of the city webpage at corvallisoregon.gov. We will talk more about the work of the Downtown Vitality Strategy Task Force later in the program. Regarding the mayor's call for new elections for the leadership of City Council, this menu item has both straightforward and hidden spices. Going into the meeting, I believed that calling an election like this was at the discretion of the mayor, thus nothing to be alarmed about. After the meeting, I read the text of the city charter, which says, quote, Section 20, At its first meeting of each odd-numbered year, the council by ballot shall elect a president and a vice president from its membership, unquote. To me, that means elections should be every 2 years, and on odd-numbered, not even-numbered years. Did you note the use of the word shall? Because a lot rides on the use of that word. According to the Corvallis City Attorney, that little word, shall, gives the mayor the discretion to call elections yearly. If he can call them yearly, can he call them whenever he wants? Whenever he might be dissatisfied with the leadership of the city council? The city attorney was not present during this meeting, so if anyone was concerned, there was no way to check the question. To me, that was a bit of hidden or unexpected spice.
And the charter does say shall elect. And it doesn't know where it says you can only do it at that time. And I did speak with the city attorney before proceeding. And the city attorney, obviously we rely on their legal advice, said I was correct in my assessment of what the charter says.
The results of the voting were more sassy up front, with the city council choosing Tony Cadena over Charlyn Ellis for president on a vote of 5-4, and Allison Bowden over Carolyn Mayers for vice president on a vote of 6-3. One of the most interesting parts of the meeting was when Councillor Bowden spoke off the cuff about why they should be vice president.
I appreciate the opportunity to run for vice president. I really deeply believe that effective leadership requires collaboration, attention to detail, and dedication to fairness. While Councillor Cadena and I differ quite disparately on ideological issues, I really wanted to call back to what Councillor Moorfield called out, that leadership is not about ideology, but a dedication to process. And that is something that Councillor Cadena and I are consistently on the same page for. I also think that the opportunity to collaborate as honestly opposite ends of the ideological spectrum on this particular council on some issues is a form of healing and transparency, that the community can see that even though we have our differences, council leadership can come together and represent a diversity of perspectives, renters, homeowners, like ideological, time on council. I think that having the ability to serve as vice president would allow me to continue to grow into the role of counselor, being able to better understand the policies and practices and help to assist in bringing forth recommendations for improvements to our own council policies, whether it be annual strategic plan reviews and quarterly city manager evaluations, so that we can continue to dig into some of the processes that came up in our own council self-evaluation. But ultimately, we do need to streamline our council processes. And I think that's something that I would look forward to collaborating on with Councillor Cadena. So thank you for your consideration.
Impressive. Despite my disappointment and my sense that calling this vote was out of order of normal procedures in Corvallis, I think it is likely the City Council will be in good hands with Councillors Cadena and Bowden in their new leadership roles. Which is important because despite the Mayor's efforts to diminish the responsibilities of the Council President and Vice President by noting that they only step in if the Mayor is unavailable, when I reviewed the policies of the City Council on the website, there are many things that Council leadership does. The last item of the Monday night meeting that I want to highlight was also covered in the Saturday, January 10th edition of the Gazette-Times by journalist Jackson Rickert in the article titled Homeless Encampments Sweeps Paused. From early in the article, quote, City Council members decided to stop clearing out encampments between January 19th and February 7th via a resolution passed Monday, January 5th. The move represents a change in strategy from last year and came after a spirited discussion, unquote. This is the item for which Councillor Bowden had attempted to alter the agenda at the beginning of the meeting. Feeling the topic was time-sensitive and not wanting to wait 2 weeks until the next City Council meeting, Councillor Bowden made a motion to introduce the resolution to pause the sweeps, and the Mayor ruled them out of order. Bowden objected, and after discussion, the members of the City Council voted to sustain the objection, and the meeting moved forward. As was noted by the Mayor, it was good to see that they could disagree, yet move forward carefully and respectfully as a body, following their procedural rules. The fact that this item made it to a vote is a victory for those councillors who have been trying to move the needle on the discussion of how we, the City of Corvallis, deal with our residents who remain unhoused. I think City councillors have been hearing from their constituents that we need to do more, and at the very least, we need to take measures to be sure that during the point-in-time count, we get the most accurate count possible. Sweeping the camps in the days running up to the count creates confusion and is more likely to lead to inaccuracies. In other meetings this week, the Downtown Vitality Strategy Task Force held an all-task force member meeting on Tuesday, January 6th. I will note that there was a quorum of the City Council at the meeting, as Councillors Cadena, Mayers, Napak, Moorfield, Olson, and Bowden were present throughout. During the main part of the meeting, the members reviewed the action items developed by the task force subcommittees, and then discussed their plans for outreach to community members as they are looking for input on their survey. Toward the end of the meeting, the subject of tax increment financing came up and was actively discussed while 6 members of the City Council, the Mayor, and the City Manager were all in the room. From my vantage point of watching from home on Zoom, I could see different combinations of these members of city leadership having side conversations with each other as the topic was being discussed. I think perhaps this is not a display of good governance, but will admit I have not read the Standard Code of Parliamentary Procedure as written by Alice Sturgis, which is the code used by the city of Corvallis, as opposed to using Robert's Rules of Order. I don't recall seeing any notification from the city that a quorum would be present during this meeting. Are there problems with that? If any of you listeners know, I'd love to hear from you via email at wendy@korcfm.com. One way or another, the City Council and we the people of Corvallis will soon be discussing tax increment financing as a means of creating revenue to improve our downtown. This item will be coming before the City Council. I can see by looking on the 3-month calendar on the city website that it is listed as an agenda item for the City Council work session of January 22nd. Those members of city leadership who were present during this task force meeting have had a head start on the conversation. Interesting. For me, learning about civics is a lifelong study. During what was potentially the final meeting of Phase 1 of the Charter Review Task Force on Wednesday, January 7th, there were no real surprises or spice. The members of the task force moved to adopt the League of Oregon Cities updated wording for Section 23F of our city charter, which aligns with other changes being recommended for the charter on the November ballot. Those items will all be forwarded to the City Council, who will have an opportunity to review them prior to accepting them during the unfinished business section of their next meeting, which falls on Tuesday, January 20th. The Planning Committee met on Wednesday, January 7th. They elected a new chair and tabled the election of a new vice chair to the next meeting. They had a staff presentation and a discussion about if commercial daycare should be permitted outright within low and medium density residential zones. The members of the commission had differing opinions on this item. At under 30 minutes, this was a short meeting with no decisions made. Staff stated that their plan was to incorporate the feedback into recommended code changes, and they will return with it at a future meeting. I note that there has been turnover in the membership of the Planning Commission, with more to come as the City Council will be holding interviews for applicants to the Planning Commission, which should result in additional members being added to the Commission in February. If you are interested in the workings of various boards and commissions that advise the City Council, this could be a good meeting to watch on Vimeo, because while it is short, it demonstrates the workings of the Planning Commission in a very accessible and digestible way. Check it out by going to vimeo.com, City of Corvallis, where the meetings are listed in chronologic order. At the City Council work session on Thursday, January 8th, 2 of the 3 agenda items had to do with the city manager. City Council gave positive feedback to Human Resources Director Mary Beth Altman Hughes regarding the desire to use an outside facilitator to help with the city manager's job performance review. This process will move forward and be in place later this year, which will be helpful to avoid the timing issues that blocked its success in 2025. Next, they discussed the written job description of the city manager. More than 10 years ago, when current city manager Mark Shepard was hired, it was standard practice to rely on the text from the city charter as a sufficient job description. Fast forward 10 years, and having a formalized written job description could help with things like job performance evaluations. The city manager was quick to point out that he may want to revise his employment contract if it is opened to add an updated job description. Did you hear that? That was spicy. Both Councilors Schaefer and Bowden asked that a job description contain language about the city manager's role in executing policies set by council. Discussion of this issue is not over, and I'm curious to see what happens next. The third item discussed at the work session was the City Council and Mayor's self-evaluation. I'm going to let you cook this one at home for yourselves. If you want to hear the discussion, you can watch the meeting via vimeo.com/City of Corvallis. Look for the item dated Thursday, January 8th. City Council Work Session, where the discussion begins at minute 45. Coming up for city meetings, there is a Safe Streets and Roads for All Task Force meeting on January 12th. On Tuesday, January 13th, there is a veritable smorgasbord of civics, with meetings of the Economy Subcommittee of the Downtown Vitality Strategy Task Force, the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisory Board, and the Historic Resources Commission. On Wednesday, January 14th, Phase 2 of the Charter Review Task Force will meet. Care to see the agendas for those meetings or find out how to attend? Go to corvallisoregon.gov/calendar, where you will find hyperlinks for information listed by date. We have reached the dessert menu, which is where I like to highlight civics-related items I deem compelling or tasty. I don't have dessert for you this week, but I do have some food for thought. It is my goal to make civics interesting, even entertaining for you here at the cafe, and in that vein, it can be tempting to find zingers to share from City Council and other meetings. After watching many meetings, I can tell you that the vast majority of the time, what I see is thoughtful people working hard to keep our city running in a way that works for all of us who live here. What is most needed is for us, what I call we the people, to pay attention and to provide feedback to both the city and the City Council. Given the changes in local and regional journalism, I realize there is difficulty in finding information in a timely fashion. If you like what you hear during this program, and if you find it helpful, consider sharing it with friends and neighbors. Share that KORC Radio 105.9 FM has a weekly news program with interesting coverage about local events. Share that the Corvallis Civics Cafe is available as a podcast on podbean.com and on Apple Podcasts. Even better, chase down the information I share about the city website. Watch some of the meeting recordings and discuss things with your family, your friends, and your neighbors. Because coming up this November, if you are registered to vote, you will be voting for a city councilor, for a mayor, for changes to our city charter, and more. I hope you agree with me that it is our civic responsibility to be prepared. Thanks for joining me at the Corvallis Civics Cafe. I hope this show serves you something new about local civics and inspires you to engage with our city. The Civics Cafe can be heard on Sundays at 1 p.m., with repeats on Mondays at 5 p.m., and on Tuesday mornings at 10 a.m., following the many moods of Ben Vaughn. The Corvallis Civics Cafe can now be heard as a podcast via podbean.com and via Apple Podcasts. If you have feedback to share, send to me an email at wendy@korcfm.com. To reach KORC's News, Music, and Civics, the email is news@korcfm.com.
Frankly, my read of the charter is that we should not be having that as an agenda item unless and until there's a resignation or for some other reason. The language is pretty clear, and I frankly disagree with the mayor on this.
Until next time, this is Wendy Byrne.